So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce first speaker, Frank Fortkin, President of Ipsos's U.S. Automotive Team. Frank, you have the floor.
Thanks, Alan. Mike, if you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to make sure you guys can see who's speaking. Mike, myself, Carlos. What we're going to talk about today is, actually, I'm pretty excited about this because it really hasn't been a study. There's a lot of syndicated studies out there around electric vehicles, but this is really the only one that focuses on what's going on at the dealerships. Are dealers ready? Is the industry ready? And I think you're going to, again, a lot of these results I think you're going to find very interesting, hopefully some good takeaways that you can bring back to your company. So before I turn it over to Carlos to talk about the method, I wanted to talk a little bit about big picture. So we did studies similar to this 3-4 years ago when there was only maybe 5 electric vehicles out there and a handful of hybrids as well. And it was clear at that time that the industry was not ready to deal with customers coming in asking questions about electric vehicles. The good news is you'll see there's been a lot of progress. There's still definitely some areas that need improvement. So what we did was we sent out a bunch of shoppers, and again, Carl's going into the detail. But the things that we covered was first, if they went to the brand site, and then maybe they go to the dealer site, and then what's the experience actually at the dealership? What's happening from an availability standpoint, and then really most important is how is the salesperson dealing with these shoppers, and are they prepared and are they knowledgeable about the subject? So, Mike, with that, then I'm going to turn it over to Carlos. And again, before Carlos starts, I know a lot of you guys have worked with us in the past. I don't think many in the audience looking at the attendee list are even aware that Ipsos has a very large mystery shopping practice that I think it's the largest mystery shopping practice in the world, and that they're doing quite a bit of work in the automotive space. And Carlos leads that group. So Carlos, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Frank. So as Frank said, we're leading the mystery shopping program here in the US. We work with a number of major OEMs. And for the EV research here, we elected to take a look at dealership selling practices. So we had a total of 201 mystery shoppers who went out. And we shopped in 12 specific markets. And the markets were chosen essentially as markets that were thought to be representative and EV ready. So we didn't want to shop markets where people weren't going to be buying EVs, where there was no real demand. We wanted to look at markets that did have a demand. And mystery shoppers, the idea was, let's take a look at things from a fairly objective point of view, and trying to audit what dealerships are doing, what they're not doing, what they're doing well. Mike, if you can advance the slide, please. So these are the brands that we shopped. Each of them had a target of somewhere between 10 and 15 total shops per brand. We didn't shop the same dealership more than once, and some dealers had more and some had fewer, but we were trying really to get a representative, albeit not particularly deep, understanding of what the dealerships are doing and the differences by brand. So any of the data you look through here, it's going to be representative of all of these brands. But yeah, just kind of keep in mind the sample size is enough to get a sense of things, but we're not, larger sample sizes would be better. Next slide, please, Mike. Last thing about the scenarios. So we tried to make this as true to life as possible. So we had an even split by gender. We identified shoppers who kind of fit the profile of an EV buyer. And the ones, whether they did or not, we put them through training, made sure that we coached them a little bit, and had them present as having an income above $100,000 and be willing to make payments of up to $800 a month for a new EV purchase. Please note it is a purchase, not a lease. And sort of the key advantage, the benefit of mystery shopping compared to, say, a survey of 1,000, 2,000 U.S. respondents, really is that last bullet point on the bottom right. It is about in-the-moment data collection. So the shoppers are there, they're going through the experience, and then they are telling us 30 minutes, an hour after they finish their shop, exactly what happened. So their recall is excellent. Their understanding of what happened is very good, and they're able to give us objective data with pretty close to 100% accuracy. I think that does it for me. So Mike, Frank, back to you.
Okay, I'll take it, Mike, and go next slide. So a couple of things to add on to what Carlos brought up. So the actual, let's call it an outline, a guide of what the shoppers were doing, that was created in conjunction with several of our automotive clients. They were aware of the program we did a few years ago. Hey, what can we do different? What's important for us to basically audit? You know, things came up like at that time, hey, we really want to know if they actually have a charging station at the dealership. Do they actually have a space in the dealership that's dedicated to electrification education? So there's a lot of new things that we added that, and we're not going to cover all of them, but they're in the actual detail of the report. But I want to make sure that you're aware that this was created not only by Ipsos, but also with our customers as well. So I wanted to thank those, some of those who are on this call for their input. Okay, current situation. Interesting, Mike, can go to the next slide. When we first started this, you know, obviously we had the issues with COVID and how the pandemic was impacting what was going on at the dealership. But what we were really surprised about was the bigger picture of all the, I would call, more recent things that are going on. I'll talk about a little bit in a second, but the good news is that the interest rates continues to rise. So this is actually coming from a survey that we're going to be releasing in a couple of weeks. But I asked them to run the data to just see how the interest in BVs have progressed just over the last year. You can see that the trend is positive, and now we have more than a third of U.S. consumers basically saying that they have high levels of interest in purchasing electric vehicle the next time they're in the market. And why this is important, if you go to the next slide, is that we not only have that, but we just have a lot of other kind of things going on that are creating what I would call, a problem to some extent. So everybody knows about the influx of new EVs coming in. Mike, next slide. The fact that recently gas prices have, gone up considerably, and I think all of us, understand that higher the gas price, the more likely they'll consider an electric vehicle, right? And then Mike, keep going. And then we have this crazy amount of buzz going on around electric vehicles. So not only are we seeing it on the news and paper, our social kind of hits of just discussion around EVs are kind of going through the roof. So you have all this kind of conversation and reasons for people to want to buy an electric vehicle, and it's actually resulted in more interest, but also a problem because they're going to the dealerships, and the dealerships aren't ready at the magnitude, I think, of what's happening. I think a lot of consumers are, they basically think that, hey, that model that they talked about, the Hummer or the Bronco or whatever it might be, is actually at the dealership right now. So the message to those on the call is we really need to manage expectations, how we do it either through the website or we do it, at the dealership or so on. Right now, I think the expectations are kind of exceeding the supply. So just kind of keep that in mind, and we're going to hit on that a lot. Before that, we go into the actual results from the shoppers going to the dealership. I wanted to talk about just some comments that we saw when we looked at the national brands. And before I even go into that, I really encourage, so there's 24 plus brands that we looked at that have, websites that involve, some aspect they have an electric vehicle, whether it's a BEV or a PHEV available. So when I went through all 24, what I was really struck with was, first of all, the quality of some of the websites. There is a wide variety. So when you go in there looking for best practice of things to do and don't, they will become very apparent quickly. So some brands are executing at a very high level, and others you wouldn't even know that they have electric vehicles because there's little mention of it, or not. They haven't made it very easy to find. And it may be because they're not ready to sell them right now, and so maybe that's how they're managing expectations. But again, a lot of different executions. So some of the things that we're seeing is brands, legacy brands, are using the electric vehicle kind of introductions to solidify their current brand image, whether that's, hey, I'm the safety guys, or I'm the tech guys, or I'm the luxury guys. So it's a great idea, and you want to tie that together, and it's another opportunity for them to kind of either build their current brand or maybe reposition it a little bit. And then we're also seeing clearly the Rivians and Polestars and Lucents, they're spending a lot of the time on the website trying to establish what their brand is and why they're different. So you'll definitely see that as you go through the different sites. And I thought it was interesting. I'm using Ford as an example, but they're not alone. You've got individuals that maybe have driven pickup trucks their whole life. They think of electric as some golf cart, and they're concerned when they hear things about, F-150 Lightning all electric, and what does that mean? So Ford's done a really good job, I think, of kind of addressing that head on, not only saying, yeah, you're not going to lose anything, but electrification is actually going to help add benefit and maybe improve some of those areas of why you bought a truck. So you'll see that's again another best practice, something that if other companies are concerned about that they should definitely look at that. I think we all know that, again, brands are using the website to help educate the consumer. The more likely a consumer has had a test drive an electric vehicle, been in an electric vehicle, understands the ownership lifestyle of owning an electric vehicle, the more likely they are to buy. I think there's been all kinds of studies that have linked that. So you definitely see brands using a lot of the homepage and space to kind of educate the shopper. But one thing that we worry about is that some are doing it to the extent where you don't even know that they sell a gas engine of a vehicle. I mean, they're almost overdoing it, and we know a very small percentage right now are buying those electric vehicles. So there's this balance that you have to find. And the other aspect is when people are shopping for electric vehicles, they're looking for the information on pricing and rebates and incentives and what's the operating cost. So I guess the message is don't trade one off that you completely miss the boat on the other. So it's important that you have a good balance, not only on the vehicles, but what you're talking about around electric. And finally, this is something that we saw on several sites, is the use of EV jargon. And our shoppers that went in and evaluated the brand websites as well are just, general Joe Blows. And when we asked them to go into the websites and see if there's any information on electric vehicles, sometimes they would come back and they would miss a tab because it said alternative fuel vehicle or hybrids, and they didn't understand that that's electric. Obviously, the experts went back and corrected that, but we can't assume that they understand everything. So just be careful. That's just another kind of message from us, is make sure that you know your audience. Okay, Mike, next slide. There's a lot of questions on the website, but one of the things I thought was important to share with you was when we talk about EVs, what are the brands doing well? So I think in general, most brands are hitting what were the most important attributes, things like what's about range, how do you charge, where to charge, they're talking about the tax incentives. But what we're seeing is less than 50% are talking about what I would call more of the cost of ownership attributes, which are important to consumers. So that, again, you'll see some sites that do a good job of that and other sites that you can't even find it on their website. So go ahead, Mike. Again, I'm not going to hit all these things, but a couple more best practices. Some of the brands are doing a great job of using testimonials, in particular of first-time buyers, in a way that makes the shopper feel, oh, I'm one of those guys, and I can understand, oh, he thought this, and now he knows it's different. A lot of really good executions around those testimonials. Instead of using the actual landing page to educate consumers about EV ownership, some are actually just sending them to a link in a clever way that allows them to do that either that moment or on their own time. Another message is, okay, we're seeing certain brands spend so much time talking about the technology that they're not really communicating the benefit of that technology. And as a shopper, they don't really, care how it's made. It's what is it? What is the benefit? So that's another one that we wanted to make sure we pointed out. Just on a couple more Spanish, Spanish speaking or Spanish language websites, the ability to flip over to that. Some brands have done a good job of that. Others, it's just not even offered. It might be offered at the dealer website, or it might be the general kind of website, but it doesn't really zero in on the electrification that's in the website. So a lot of things to talk about, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, so I wanted to make sure that we got those out. Mike, I'll flip that over to you now. Let you take it from here.
Great, thanks, Frank. Yeah, so Frank's giving you sort of a good view of where things are standing, from excitement over electric vehicles and how they're being positioned on the national manufacturer websites. So now we're going to dive more into what's happening at the dealerships. And I'm going to start with looking at what's happening on the dealer websites in particular. And what we're largely finding is that the information that a lot of consumers are seeking isn't really available on the dealer website. Certainly being able to view inventory online, carry over from what people do traditionally, that is working well, right? So the dealers have done a good job of putting their EV inventory into that same service and being able to provide that. But the ability to look for information like rebates, like tax incentive information, or even charging information online. These are, again, curious customers who are going to be entering potentially into something very new. They have a lot of questions. And we did note some very good practices. One in particular that we pulled out just to kind of highlight was that one dealership, this came from one of our shoppers who shopped an Audi dealer in the Seattle area, noted that there was a rotating ad that was highlighting the tax credit availability, whether it was for a BEV or a PHEV. More of a concern, noted on a shopper who shopped a Polestar in Santa Monica. It was, very hard to find that same information. So again, one kind of highlighting it in a fashion where it pops up, another was unable to really find that. So it's that detailed information. Frank alluded it to on the national website in case of some of the cost ones, but for here, also at the dealer level, there were some concerns. Frank also noted the option to view in Spanish. When we only saw that about a third of the dealer websites that we visited were offering a Spanish translation of the website information, and that's a great practice. The Spanish Spanish-speaking population is a large portion of the automotive market, of the U.S. market in particular. And so when you can have appointment setting or chat functions, follow-up functions, inventory search, so all the information that potentially the consumer could be looking for and sort of surfing around on your website, having that in Spanish just enables that community to engage and to learn and to feel more confident and comfortable as they're potentially making this choice to move toward an electric vehicle. Now I'm kind of moving on to the actual appointment, and as Carlos pointed out, we tried to balance how people were approaching the dealer. So we had people making phone appointments, we had people making online appointments, and then we had people doing walk-ins. Similar to how any dealer would experience their normal flow of interactions with potential customers. So when we looked at the people who actually made an appointment, the actual appointment process seemed to be going pretty well, right? So, 72% of those trying to make an online appointment were able to do so successfully, 82% for a phone, also successful. So that's not too bad. Where were some concerns is when there was an appointment made, that there was a lack of preparedness by the dealer for when that customer was coming in. Only 39% of the time, the dealer was ready with the actual vehicle, knowing what that customer was coming in to look at, which vehicle they were interested in. That information wasn't necessarily, or that vehicle wasn't ready. 45% had information available, and 16% were deemed not having been prepared in any way. Obviously, if we know what they're coming in for, we want to be able to be ready for them so that that time with the customer is well spent and they feel like they're important. Now, I wanted to point out a good practice here, and this is actually really something that we would encourage and is well done. And we know availability, Frank kind of talked about it earlier, is an issue. But we have a practice here from BMW dealer in Denver where the salesperson told our shopper, hey, we don't have that vehicle on the lot right now, but one's scheduled to come in tomorrow, in fact. And they suggested, hey, let's set up an appointment for 3 days from now so that I'll be sure to have the vehicle on the lot and ready for you. That is a great way to handle that situation. So you're managing the expectation, you're making sure the vehicle will be there. Having somebody just tell you, listen, we don't have one, I can't really tell you when we're going to have one, all that does is create a lack of confidence for a customer who is curious and potentially ready to move in that direction, and that's discouraging them. When we switch to actually being at the dealership and we look at the EVs that were available at and present at the dealers, it's not quite where we need to be just yet. So when we looked at and asked our shoppers, note if an EV is being showcased in the showroom. 39% of the time they're saying, yep, yeah, there was an EV, at least one on the showroom floor. But obviously there's a vast majority of the time then that is not the case, that we're seeing that these EVs are not being placed on the floor. When we move to the conversation around on the lot, a little better. There certainly is only, a quarter of the time we're finding that the dealership doesn't have an EV on the lot. So the vast majority, roughly, 3/4 of the time there is an EV, but most of that is limited, meaning, 37%, I had maybe 1 or 2 EVs on a lot. What we want to see obviously more of is when they have choices for the customer. Because they're curious, but they're also still going to be selective. And so when there's more choices on the lot, they're more likely to get excited over maybe that one that just has the right color, the right features, the right content, whatever it might be. So this is something that we look back at in 2017, and it has gotten slightly better, but it still is well short of where we need to be. This is really a commentary on the availability of the products as they're being supplied to the dealers so that they have them for customers who are now excited to come in. What is really good is the idea that, or the notion or the acknowledgement of a charging station being at the dealership. So 64% of the time we were noting from our shoppers that, yep, the dealer does have an external charging station available. Now, this is great for customers who are returning to an EV. So you've got that person who was one of the original buyers and maybe they're ready to get a newer model, and as they're in, and we all know that spending time at the dealership, you're not there for a few minutes, you can spend a fair amount of time there. Great opportunity for somebody to be able to charge up, but more importantly from my perspective for that new customer, it shows a commitment. It communicates that yes, we sell EVs and they're important. We have charging stations here because of that. So again, it's raising the presence, it's raising or acknowledging the importance of EVs as part of the options, the portfolio products that you can see and choose from. Moving into the showroom. So we wanted to look at that first point, and this was actually from a suggestion from many of our clients. They wanted to know, well, what about dedicated EV space? Is that being allocated at the dealerships? And we're seeing about 1 in 5 right now that are doing that. And that could be anything from an area in the dealer that has signage or information or some details on the vehicle. One best practice that was noted, or they see a comment here from a shopper at a Volkswagen dealer in Los Angeles, is that dealer had set up some touch screens that the consumer could sit at. So as maybe they're not necessarily engaged with your salespeople as of yet, or there's a pause, they have the option to sit down at these touch screens and look around and get information and learn a little more. So this is a good practice that we're encouraging. This is happening obviously at a Tesla and Polestar. Our shoppers are noting that this was also happening more often at VW, at Volvo, and Jaguar dealerships in particular. What's not happening as often, and this is low, it was low back in 17, continues to be underrepresented, and that is other types of marketing materials, whether it's EV signage or images being posted in the dealership, branding of the EV itself, or brochures available for consumers. the presence of these is not very common. And so again, a little bit of underrepresentation of the EVs. Love the idea, love that dedicated EV space is starting to happen. Another thing that was noted is what we call charging partnering opportunities. And this is where we're seeing that those dealers, these brands that are offering electric vehicles to customers, are also offering branded charging options or charging stations that can be installed at your home. And we see this as obviously a positive potential new revenue stream for the dealers and the brands, but it also is a great message. And what I mean by that is, if as a consumer who's curious, one of the biggest concerns they have is, how do I set up charging? You know, what's that process like, and what's the right charging system to get to install in my home? That's really concerning for people because this is so new. It's a very unique and stressful experience. So when I see a Tesla charger, a Volkswagen charger, a Ford charger, this incites confidence that not only is this something that will be managed properly through my relationship with my dealer, you know, they can help set it up, but it's also the proper charger for the vehicle that I'm getting. It creates confidence, it alleviates some of that concern that many customers express as they're going through this process. All right, now we're getting to probably one of the most important aspects, and that's the salesperson. And back in 2012, we talked about the dedicated EV salesperson. And we did ask it still in that same sense, and what we found is that about 17% of dealers had a dedicated salesperson for EVs, but a larger percent, 67% additionally or in turn had a salesperson who, while they weren't dedicated to EVs, were very knowledgeable, deemed by how the shoppers experienced them. 16% said, nope, not dedicated and not very knowledgeable. And what's really important here is understanding that relationship between that salesperson and how knowledgeable they are, how they're viewed as being knowledgeable, and the overall sales experience our shoppers were noting. And you can see the drastic difference that having knowledge has. Certainly dedicated had the highest scores overall at a 77% overall sales experience, and we're going to revisit that number in a little bit. Not dedicated, but what seems to be a very knowledgeable salesperson at 68% overall sales experience, and then only 11% when we had a situation where the salesperson wasn't viewed as knowledgeable. Now, when we talk about the unknowledgeable salesperson, this brings up some real concerns. Concerns specifically that the consumer is going to be left with unanswered questions. And keep in mind that this is a very curious person who's considering making a very different choice in their vehicle. And that choice isn't just about the vehicle, it's about a lifestyle choice. It's about, how do I manage a vehicle overall? And so they come with a lot of questions. And if they don't get those questions answered properly, they're likely going to not transact. It's potentially a lost sale for that dealer. So we were noting some concerning interactions where our shopper was saying, the salesperson wasn't familiar. And we spent so much of our time just trying to find answers that I really couldn't rely on the information I was giving, or I had to ask all the questions, right? So it wasn't a give from the dealer or from the salesperson to the consumer, but it was more they were trying to pull it out. And for the most part, they weren't able to answer, or they felt like, you just got this vehicle and you really have spent no time with it. All of these cases reduce confidence, create concern, and likely aren't going to help the customer make them move toward an EV. When we did talk to, where do the sales people tend to spend the conversations, as well as how knowledgeable were they, what we're seeing is that they're pretty comfortable speaking around, and most often are going to speak about the product attributes and the charging elements. And these are important attributes, and we're all curious about those as potential customers. But what's not being talked about nearly enough, and where our shoppers weren't noting the sales people as being knowledgeable enough, was when it talked about cost and customer support. And Frank talked about all of those cost elements, right? Cost of ownership, like maintenance and service, and what does it actually cost to charge my vehicle, and is this better than gas, and what's the battery life, and when I have to replace it. All of these things are the customer just not knowing and trying to sort through this in their head. So there is a lot of opportunity for the salespeople to even step up their game further. And we see that results in a better sales experience, which means more likely that you'll find a customer wanting to move into an EV. So now let's talk about the actual EV at the dealer. So roughly 2/3 of the time, the EV was there that we were targeting. This includes those that were walking in. So we expect to be able to find, electric vehicle X at this particular dealer, and in fact, it was there. But there were about 1/3 of the time where the consumer was told that the EV wasn't there, and that wasn't always happening right up front. So in the case of some of the cases, 15% of the time of that group that said no, the EV wasn't there, that was from appointments, and they were told up front that, yeah, we don't have it, but the appointment was made anyway to come and talk. Sometimes it was when I was first greeted. So I've come in, this is what I'm looking for, oh, we don't have that one. But then there are a larger percent of the time, it was after talking with the salesperson for a while. And that would seem misleading, but quite honestly, that's not a bad thing. Because keep in mind that the customers are coming in curious about an electric vehicle as a potential vehicle, but it's really the salesperson's job to help identify what the needs are of that customer. And it may be that the EV isn't the best choice. It also may be that the EV is a good choice, but we just don't have it right now. And so some things that we've noted as potential concerns, or maybe you can consider it as an opportunity, is the idea of a bridge strategy. And I don't know, Frank, if you want to talk a little bit about your experience like that, but Frank's got a good example of a bridge opportunity that could have happened.
Sure. And it's interesting. So I am in a situation where my lease is up in October, and I'm not going to name the brand, but I've been eyeing a particular electric vehicle. And the release date of that particular vehicle has been now delayed a year. So I'm at that stage where, okay, do I just extend my lease in a regular way? Do I just buy something else? Maybe go to another manufacturer that has an EV that I like? And as I sat back, I'm like, okay, what they should be doing to me is, okay, Frank, yeah, let's bridge this. We'll create some type of benefit for you staying with us for another year until this vehicle is ready. But actually starting, that's just one example, but what the message is to the manufacturers and to the dealerships is try to do both. We understand that the salespeople they're not to sell an EV. They're basically to sell a vehicle. And that's what puts food on their table, and that's what they're going to do. But if the manufacturers can find a way to help incentivize them to do that, to do maybe do the right thing, then that's what they should do. So we're just kind of challenging the industry to come up with some creative ways to bridge the gap until the EV is actually ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, and to Frank's point, the idea of not losing that customer, because in Frank's case, let's say there is not a bridge opportunity, and he doesn't want to necessarily extend his or continue in that lease. He really wants to move into an EV. That sale may end up with another brand. So again, these bridge opportunities, one is if you really got a customer who is really wanting the EV, but that EV isn't available yet, maybe there's some creative ways to get them hooked up with that EV for when it comes and bridge them up to that point. Another noted concern, though, that was actually mentioned by many of our shoppers that were told about, well, we don't have one, is it was real easy for the dealer just to say, hey, there's a microchip shortage, so we just can't get the vehicles in. Now, that may seem reasonable, that may seem legitimate, but it also sends a message of basically a concern, not just about EVs, but about just in general on the ability for that brand to be able to support or provide the inventory that I'm looking for. So while it may seem like a logical explanation, it could have some negative impacts that we have to be careful about. All right. Now I want to talk about the test drive. There is probably nothing more exciting and more really sort of boosting of EV interest than getting in an electric vehicle for the first time and actually experiencing it. So we strongly encourage that whatever you can do, get that customer to come in and actually get in a vehicle and drive it. Because like Frank pointed out with Ford, they're trying to explain to a customer that some of the misconceptions about an electric vehicle, like it's a golf cart, it's underpowered, aren't true. And once you get in a vehicle and you experience its performance, you experience its quietness and all of the other benefits, and even some of the sort of ancillary benefits of the additional storage space and design-ish opportunities and things of that nature, that experience is really helpful. So it's really important that we get a customer in a vehicle. It's ideal to get them in the one they're interested in, but if you don't have that vehicle, get them in another one. Let's say if you're at a brand that happens to have multiple EV options to select from. Not getting them in, obviously, doesn't allow that. This is one of the best selling tools, is the actual experience. Now, there were a lot of noted concerns around COVID, and this is really important for the dealer to manage and the salesperson to manage for that customer. Assure them that steps are being taken, that this vehicle has been sanitized and prepared and is safe for you to be able to get in and to drive. And they may be even reluctant to have you join them, or maybe your salespeople will be reluctant. These are things that we need to put steps in place, masking up, creating distancing, creating steps to make sure that the vehicle is in a sanitized state so that everybody is comfortable. Because again, it's about getting the people in the test drive so that that experience really can foster that interest. All right. So before we kind of wrap things up, I wanted to, and I kind of mentioned a couple of these metrics, these KPIs. These are at the end of our shops. We ask our shoppers to give an evaluation of the dealer experience on a 11-point scale, 0 to 10. And we've summed up the top 3 box scores. And so what you can see is overall vehicle experience, and salesperson's knowledge of the EVs are pretty much in line. They're very comparable. And we saw that earlier when we were looking at salesperson knowledge and how knowledgeable that salesperson is, how did that reflect on the overall EV experience? And you can see that they were very connected. And again, I would say these are okay scores in general, but we would hope that these scores would move higher as we get better at selling vehicles, as we get better at having the EVs available, as our salesperson's knowledge of the EVs and the EV lifestyle in particular improves. What's really lagging, though, is that our EVs being featured at the dealer. And that's only at right now 40% overall rating for top 3 box. So there's a big gap there in terms of where it needs to get to in order to be at a level where we feel confident and comfortable that things are going well. Now, Carlos mentioned this early on, and so did Frank. This is not a quantitative study. This was 200 shops across the industry. And it was meant to try to give you a good depiction of things that are going well, things that aren't going so well. But this is the one case with these KPIs that we thought we'd give you sort of a look at the brands. And we limited this to the brands that we shopped at least, over 5 times, meaning we left out the niche brands. And so most of these have over 10 shops or more. Again, this is not quantifiable, but we're just kind of showing you how they fell out in rank. And what you can see, not surprising, Polestar and Tesla are at the top. And they have the inherent advantage that all they sell is EVs. So they better be really good at the shopping experience. They better really be good at the knowledge and having the EVs featured at the dealer. And of course, they rank 1 and 2. But what's really interesting is that the top 5 in particular is pretty consistent, right? Volkswagen is 3rd across the board. Volvo was tied for 3rd, and then was just outside of the top 5 for featured at the dealership. And then there's Chevrolet behind them, Nissan, just outside of the top 5 for everything but featured at the dealer. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. And again, if you look at the details of the report, you get all of the information behind this. I've put these at rankings, but the span of scores is pretty great here in terms of, how did the top performing brands score for overall EV shopping experience versus the lower performing ones. There's a large span, but again, it's something that if you subscribe to the study, you have all that along with all the detail, the individual questions, the comments from our shoppers, all of that knowledge is part of the report. But what I'm going to finish with
Mike, can I jump in before, just it's important to go back to that slide real quick? Okay, so one of the things here too to remember is, you don't see Rivian and others, that this is based upon the ones that actually did the dealer shop and the dealer website and so on. So companies like Rivian and Lucid and others where we don't have that experience, they're not included in this. Some of the executions, I'm sure, at least online, are really good with those brands. And the other big point is this is a recommendation, whether you use Ipsos or you use another mystery shopping company. What we've done in the past is, like instead of doing 10 shops, we may do, all 400 dealers for a certain brand, and then allow them to also do a competitive set of maybe a like vehicle type or a brand. And that way it's much more quantifiable. But what the reason companies do this, and we've done it for other companies in the past, is, you've heard a lot of things, okay, there's not enough explanation of the cost, is, okay, let's implement some training or add some training to help our salespeople explain that in an easy way. So what they'll do is they'll first have a benchmark, they'll put the training in place, and then they go back to see if they got the lift that they wanted to. So that's another way why a lot of the brands might use this information and kind of almost customize this type of approach for their own brand. That's it, Mike. Thanks.
Yep, no, good point. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that. All right, so this will be kind of wrapping it up, but wanted to leave you with what we basically started as the themes was the do's and don'ts. And we've been sort of talking a little bit about that throughout, but sort of summarizing it at the end here. So these are the do's that we were noting, and starting with the dealer website. Obviously, it's feature the EV on the home page and the searchable inventory tools. That's really important because people, again, they're going to turn to the websites first, whether it's a national website or the dealer-specific website. They're going online to see, all right, let me take a look at this. Let me see what information I can find, and really make available and easy to find that specific information. So general information, yep, very important. Don't stop doing that. But help the customer in that decision that they're about to make or that they're trying to figure out, is this right for them? And so they're seeking knowledge, they're seeking details. Right, and even consider having a very specific section dedicated to EVs or an FAQ page. Those are helpful. These are things that people can identify with and quickly go to, hopefully, to be able to get some of those questions answered. When it comes to appointments, let's be certain that the EV is available and ready. Remember the one dealer who said, hey, don't have one now, got one coming in, let's schedule it for when it's here. That's a great way to do it. You don't want to just mislead people and say, yep, they come on in, and then tell them, oh, well, we don't have one available now, or we don't have one on the floor. We really want to get into the practice. And this is also, just the manufacturers needing to make sure dealers have what they're needing to capitalize on all this excitement and interest. And always pre-prepare that information. So if you know somebody's coming in, this doesn't apply to walk-ins, but certainly whether it's an online or a phone appointment, and you know what they're coming in for, have the vehicle ready, have the information ready, because this is what they're coming in for. This is not like a normal buyer who is pretty comfortable with how vehicles work and what's that like owning a vehicle. This is all new. So you got to understand that they come with more questions than most. On the showroom and on the lot, we want to make sure that the EVs are being featured, right? People want to be able to see it. They want to be able to see that the EV is part of what you do, that it is important, and that it is relevant. So having that acknowledgement, seeing it on the showroom floor, and also improving the number that are available at the dealer, giving customers choices, just like they would have a choice for a traditional gas engine vehicle. And there's I've got 10 different ones to choose from of a particular model. I'm not saying you have to have 10. I'm just saying we need to have more than just one there available for, it's like, here's the one you can get, or we're going to have to order one. People get excited, and if it's right for them, it's a chance to capitalize at that point. Having that charging station, great way of communicating EV presence and importance. So that is something we continue to promote, as is the idea of having a dedicated space at the dealer. Again, communicate, give them opportunities to learn, give them information without having it be too difficult to find. And that branded partner charging option, also a really interesting idea, because it does really ease some of those major concerns around what's the right charger, how do I get it set up, having that branded sort of relationship helps them already give you that sort of credit. Oh, this will be the right one, and they know how to set me up. So I feel good about that. Salesperson, certified, trained EV salesperson, really important. We saw the difference between people who were knowledgeable about EVs and those that weren't, and what that sales experience looked like. So it's really important. The main reason here is trust. Again, new customers seeking information, really wanting to understand and get a feel for what these new vehicles offer and what it'll be like. That's a big choice for somebody. That's a big question, a big step. And so having trust in your salesperson goes a long way. And their job is really to address all of those general questions, but also the very detailed ones, and in particular, the concerns that they're expressing. And qualify that potential EV customer, right? Your goal is to make sure that the EV is right. There's so much excitement, so much buzz going on. People, are anxious or curious or just, fired up about the idea of getting in an electric vehicle and moving in that direction, but it may not be right for everybody. So it's the dealership's, the salesperson's job to help kind of go through that process. And truly, if that isn't the right choice, then you have the opportunity to maybe steer them into a product that is the right choice, whether that's a different alternative fuel vehicle, or maybe it's, go back to a gas vehicle engine, whatever that situation may be. And definitely be upfront about product availability. You don't want to, again, get people in and then tell them that, oh, we don't have it. And those bridge tactics, like what Frank was describing, would have been beneficial. That's a great opportunity to keep that EV sale down the road when the vehicle's there, but keep them in the brand at the same time. You don't want to lose them to another brand, to a different EV, whatever it might be. And then test drive. That experience is everything, right? Get them in a vehicle, let them drive it. It starts to sort out some of those misconceptions and some of the concerns that they may have from a product standpoint. It's also a chance to demonstrate the charging process, right? Again, got to understand that most consumers are going to be very novice. They're not going to know a lot about this. So they'll want to know, well, how do I connect the charging gun? How do I know how long it's going to take? Or where's it telling me how, quote unquote, full my charge is and how much range I have? So it's a perfect chance to demonstrate that process, to educate them. And then lastly, really pay attention to their concerns over COVID-19, have the protocols in place. We know things are getting better. We know things are starting to open up again, but you want to make sure that, some consumers are still going to have concerns. They may be more comfortable being masked. They may be more comfortable, just sort of having those assurances that they're protected. And then just in general, and we kind of said this before, EVs are not for everyone. So we got to make sure that while we want to capitalize on that excitement, we don't want to lose that customer as a potential sale. And so the salespeople, they need to feel confident that, one, they can position and market the EV correctly with that customer, but they also need to be able to identify that, well, maybe, hey, for Mike, the EVs are not really the right choice. So let's move you to something that really would be the right choice. That, again, is about that whole trust process, right? Belief in my salesperson, knowing that they're looking out for my best interest. That's going to really win them over at the end of the day. And then lastly, one of the first points we made, make sure that everything for these customers is made available in Spanish when that is their preferred language. You don't want to discourage a potential customer because you couldn't communicate with them in a way that was effective for them. So your websites, your appointment process, everything, even your salespeople being fluent would go a long way in helping a very significant portion of the buying community.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I can jump in here real quick, a little extra color commentary on that. So I've already seen some questions around, hey, what's the breakup by demographics and things like that. So I want to reiterate, this is not a survey. So it's not like we have X amount of female respondents and so on. We had a mix of shoppers, all ages and kind of ranges of expertise. But I can tell you that it's clear Where we did the shops, those like California, which there's a much higher degree of knowledge, both from the salespeople as well as the shoppers, that they tend to score higher. So I would imagine that brands that have been selling EVs are doing things a little bit better. I think you saw that in Mike's brand chart, because that certainly maybe some of those brands have just been doing it for a lot longer. So, when you take that into consideration, if you're going to do a study like this on your own, be aware that there will be differences like this. And I know even some manufacturers, they only allow certain dealers to offer, electric vehicles. And so, you have to consider that as well. Last thing I want to state is, Mike and I, this is a lot of general kind of to-dos. We understand that some dealerships are very small in size, are part of a, maybe they're more of a showroom than they are. They don't have a dealer lot. Or they may be dual dealers with other brands and so on. So again, take these as more general statements, and there will be differences based upon kind of the mix and the size of the dealership. But I think this should give you a lot of good direction on things to think about, as we move into the next stage. Okay, last slide. I'll take this one, Mike. And again, we already brought it up to you. The study is available for purchase. If you guys are interested, anyone's interested, please reach out. We can take care of that. But also wanted to state that we believe the true value of really kind of helping your training and education groups is to customize this, do more of your dealers, make sure you set it up so you're doing a pre and post so that whatever you're doing to kind of change behaviors is being measured in one way. So that's another thing. Again, if you guys are interested, to please reach out to us. There was the majority of the questions I saw were more around method and like I said, around basically people thinking it's a survey, so it's not. With that, Mike, anything else on your end before we?
No, I think the only other thing, and that is just if you wanted to mention some of you kind of mentioned the upcoming electric vehicle study that we'll be publishing, but a few other interesting webinars coming up as well.
Sure. For those of you, some of you have been to previous webinars that we've done. This is actually one in a series. We have a couple more coming up. So we have one that is specific to electric vehicles from a product side. We used one of the slides earlier, but we'll be having a presentation on July 27th. John Kaiser will be leading that. Just again, it's multi-country. It's what's going on from a trend standpoint on the actual product. In August, we have the head of our quality practice who's doing additional research on, how quality is different as it relates to electric vehicles. Things are popping, how consumers are looking at it. In September, we're going to be having a presentation on kind of the buzz and social and being able to try to understand if a manufacturer is getting that buzz, positive buzz, relative to other launches and things like that. And then finally, we have another presentation in October around what's the latest in shared mobility and how are consumers dealing with that, both current car owners and people that don't necessarily own a vehicle. So again, wanted to thank everybody for their time. And hopefully we'll be able to give you a couple of things to think about. And we look forward to talking to you later in the month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, Carlos, and Frank for today's really interesting presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You will be receiving a direct link to today's recorded presentation, and be on the lookout for that sometime tomorrow. And of course, we welcome every opportunity to speak with you directly, so please reach out to us. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.